From Flourish DX School, this is the Flourishing at School podcast. With mental health becoming a global priority, we are your partner for creating schools where students, teachers and school leaders feel good and function well, becoming the best versions of themselves and contributing to a flourishing world.
Welcome to the Flourishing at School podcast. I'm Tamara Lechner. Each week, my co-host Jason Van Schie and I bring you the best practitioners, academics, and everything in between in order to inform best practice in whole school mental health. Jason, I have done the last two recordings solo and without you, so I'm happy to see you here.
I didn't even realize it was two. That's how busy I've been, Tamara. I realized you did one with Elka. Who was the other one that you did solo with?
It's going to be a surprise. And I've got to, it was with Bill Vining from Hartbridge in Arkansas. So someplace we haven't visited yet.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm enjoying you doing them solo tomorrow. That's a lot easier, particularly when they're US time zone or European time zone.
Absolutely. And I think that's what prompted Jason was quite sick of my, what are you doing for your well-being question? And so I've switched it up today, and I was thinking very specifically around your peak performance, and you're wearing multiple hats and juggling competing deadlines. And I wondered what you do to prime yourself for those flow experiences where you're in the zone getting a lot done.
As someone who I have never been diagnosed as ADHD, but definitely around the office, they've all labeled me with ADHD. I find it hard to get into the zone. I really need to find a quiet space, right, and have blocked out time to do that. One thing that I was talking about with someone else recently, though, is energy management. So, because I am essentially my own boss, I have a number of employees, but I can work my own hours, is I can, if I need to have the night off, I'll have the night off. If I'm feeling energized and I want to get stuff done, I'll get it done. If I want to have a nap during the day, I'll have a nap during the day. It's about just listening to your body and going, okay, yep, now I feel like I'm in a work mode. Now I feel like I need to rest. And I find if I don't fight it, I actually can be really productive and not feel burnt out. So just listening to my body and taking those peaks and troughs and just responding appropriately, I guess.
That's a great hack, and I think one we should all listen to. Well, I want to hear the same in a moment from our guest. I'm delighted to welcome Rhiannon McGee. Rhiannon and I go way back to the 2018s and the 2019s at Geelong Grammar. Rhiannon is the Director of Student Experience and Engagement at Geelong Grammar School, and she leads the school's wellbeing strategy across 4 campuses. That's a lot of campuses. And I know Rhiannon is passionate about promoting community wellbeing, and she's committed to strengthening the nexus between research, policy, practice, all in the educational context. So welcome, Rhiannon.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Jason. So happy to be here.
Do you have a flow hack? Because 4 campuses, that's a lot. Is there something you do to prime your energy management and your performance?
Oh, look, I think I have to focus on the things that really energize me and build those positive emotions. I actually just jumped off at one of our Discovering Positive Education sessions with my colleague, and we were focusing on positive emotions. And so being back on campus and engaging with students and with staff and those real life interactions, I suppose, generate an experience of flow for me and energize me and mean that I can press on and focus on being very purposeful in my work. So, yeah, it's a good year for that reason.
Mm-hmm. So, Rhiannon, you've obviously been working in the space for a number of years, and you'd be well known to a lot of the listeners of the podcast, no doubt, as well, with your work at Geelong Grammar School. But can you maybe give us, if you think back to the start of your career, just a bit of a brief rundown of how you've gotten to where you are and what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, I'm actually in my 20th year as an educator, which is quite hard to believe. And I'm feeling a little old saying that, but I started out as an English teacher. I came from a family of educators. My father was a principal, my mother was a English coordinator, and so it was inevitable that I entered into that space, try as I might to resist it. And, you know, had always been very interested in mental health promotion, having been exposed to mental illness in my own family, and moved into pastoral leadership roles and wellbeing leadership roles fairly early on. Undertook a Masters of Student Wellbeing to help me with that. And through that pathway became very interested in positive psychology. And so at my last school, Loreto Toorak, while I was studying my Masters of Applied Positive Psychology, we brought in a whole school approach to positive education. And I worked with some colleagues in leading that. And so my role there evolved from a pastoral care role into one which was focused on wellbeing and positive education. So supporting students' needs in real time and responding to issues as they arose, but also looking at how we might be proactive around promoting wellbeing. And then that led me to Geelong Grammar, where I became the head of positive education in mid-2017, which feels like a long time ago now. And where I met Tamara and you, Jason, in my travels, and that role has evolved to that focus on whole school wellbeing programs, incorporating our positive education approach, but also more recently bringing an emphasis on our First Nations programs into my portfolio and supporting the work of our First Nations student coordinator, as well as transition across campuses, so student transition, because we do have 4 campuses. And leadership as well is another part of my portfolio. So, yes, I've had the great opportunity to evolve whilst at Geelong Grammar School.
Yeah, 20 years. Yeah, you learn a few things, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like I'm always learning still, though.
When that's when we first met, we were learning together in the Discovering Positive Education course that Geelong Grammar has all staff members take as they join the team. And
that's right.
You probably don't know this, but Jason and I did an episode that was podcast bingo. And we took the themes that many of our guests had talked about. And one of the themes that came up on our podcast bingo was Geelong Grammar School, because so many of our researchers and our experts and our practitioners mentioned something about the GGS model or having learned through a Discovering Positive Education course. And so I wonder if, is right. And kudos to you and your team there. But I guess what I wonder is, since I last worked with you, which is back in 2019, could you tell us a bit about what's shifted at GGS? Because I know that you've evolved your approach to well-being. And I would love, for 2 reasons, I want our listeners to hear this. 1, to understand where it started and where it's going, but 2, to recognize that it is an evolving. It's never done. It's never finished, right? So could you tell us a bit about that evolution?
Absolutely, Tamara. So yes, we have been very fortunate to be the birthing place, I suppose, for want of a better term, of positive education. And for a variety of reasons, we were in the right place at the right time in a lot of ways. And we were fortunate to have Marty Seligman come along and live on campus for a number of months. And from that, a whole school approach to positive education evolved. And we taught positive education explicitly. We emphasised staff professional learning, as you mentioned, Tamara, and really what guided our approach and still guides our approach is an emphasis on learning the skills and strategies of positive psychology and wellbeing, of living authentically what we learn and bringing it into our own lives before we can teach and impart those skills and strategies to our students and embed that into our whole school life. And so positive education is still a central pillar of our educational approach, alongside 2 other pillars, creative education and adventure education. And so one way that we've been evolving is looking at the way that those 3 pillars intersect and work together. We really value a holistic education, and when those 3 pillars are working well together, then we really feel that we are offering our students the best form of that holistic education. So we've been doing a lot of work with our colleagues in creative and adventure ed in exploring the ways that we really might integrate rather than having positive education out there explicitly on its own. So that's one way that we've been evolving. Another way is really looking at how positive education can be integrated into a broader emphasis on wellbeing. Schools, there's so much that contributes to a whole school approach to wellbeing, whether it's providing support for those students, when you're looking at the 3 tiers of need, I suppose, how do we respond to acute needs? How do we teach wellbeing skills and strategies more broadly? What is our supporting infrastructure for students? There's so much that goes into a whole school approach to wellbeing, and positive education is a really important part of that, but it's not the only part. So we've been reconceptualising, what does wellbeing mean? Where does Pos Ed fit? And one extra element, I suppose, that we've introduced to our whole school approach to wellbeing and positive education has been a coaching approach. And so that's something we've introduced into our secondary years as a way of helping our students develop new habits, applying the learning around wellbeing and positive education through setting wellbeing goals, through engaging with learning coaches. We've shaped a new role called the learning coach, just to extend that emphasis on proactive approaches to wellbeing that we've been teaching through Pos Ed, but then giving our students the best opportunity to apply that learning and engage in a cycle of self-regulation, I suppose. So we're in our 3rd year of this coaching approach now.
Can I ask you, so the coaching is adult to student, or is it peer coaching?
It's currently adult to student, yes. So we have about 50 of our staff who are in the role of learning coach, and they have groups of about 15 students through what we call our program Navigate in the middle school, Navigate middle school and senior school pathways. So again, that holistic focus on wellbeing, on belonging and engagement, on career pathways. It's a broad curriculum now, and Pos Ed is a very strong part of that. And then so our learning coaches engage in one-on-one coaching conversations with their students throughout the year. But we do want to build that approach with peer coaching, giving our students the opportunity to learn coaching skills. And we have various approaches and have had various approaches whereby staff can also experience coaching. So, yeah, always room to grow. So they're the areas that we want to build. Yeah.
Now, Rhiannon, I saw a photo of you and one of our previous podcast guests on LinkedIn recently, Susie Green.
Yes.
And obviously she's got a background in coaching, psychology and positive psychology. So no doubt she's helping you with your approach.
She is. Absolutely. I've known Susie for a long time. Actually, when I was studying my Masters of Applied Positive Psychology at Melbourne Uni, I studied her work around coaching in educational settings, and then in my previous school at Loreto Toorak, we engaged with Susie to do a similar kind of thing, to introduce coaching for students and for staff. And she did a fabulous job, and her team did a fabulous job of providing some really strong professional learning for staff. And so we've done the same thing at Geelong Grammar, and her team have facilitated a number of workshops, just introductory skills to coaching. We're not saying that they're qualified, certified coaches. We're introducing a coaching approach because that's the most realistic thing to do in a school setting. So, yes, it's been a fabulous partnership with Susie, which really just builds on a strong relationship she's had with Geelong Grammar for a long time.
Yeah, no, she's good people, that's for sure. Now, Rhiannon, like you said, you've been working in the space of 20 years. You've been at Geelong Grammar since 2017. I'm sure our listeners would love to know something that you've tried to support mental health in students or staff that has worked really well.
I think what tends to work best is by providing as much choice for staff and students as possible. I think, some of my fondest memories are of optional mindfulness courses that we've put on for staff in my previous context and my current context, and where your wellbeing champions really come to the fore, and giving them the opportunity to extend that knowledge and that passion. And similarly with students, what tends to work best is when they have a voice, and when they can contribute to the evolution of your approach. Not always possible, but that tends to be what works best from my perspective, really cultivating your champions and being adaptable to the input and the needs of your community.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it when people haven't been given the choice, and it's like, no, we're doing mindfulness this term, and you're going to sit there and be quiet regardless whether you want to or not.
Exactly.
It doesn't go down so well.
No. And that's, it's hard in schools because you need a bit of both. It's how do we, because we do in positive education, we really focus on exposing our school community to, explicit, strategic, proactive approaches to wellbeing. And so we want them to have that exposure, but also we've got to meet our community where they're at. So, it's often a real tension. And I think one of the hardest things about leading wellbeing is that, it's that in some ways you need to sometimes take a one-size-fits-all approach, but, you're often going to have students and staff who aren't with you, so how do you engage with them and meet them where they're at whilst also extending those who are enthusiastic, are the champions. That's always where the tension lies, I find.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think you do a brilliant job of managing that tension and offering both this is the standard, step up. This is an ingredient you need to learn, but then letting people go and say, okay, now make your own recipe. You have to know the ingredients, but we're not going to tell you how to mix them together.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm going to piggyback on Jason's question about something that went well, and I know this one you'll be great at answering because you've given a whole presentation on it. We love talking about the lessons learned from something that fell flat. And I know you and I both have given the 10 lessons learned talked from Geelong Grammar. But could you share for a school that's not as far along and maybe just starting out in the journey, could you tell them what they might learn from something that didn't go so well?
Yeah, look, I think really continuing on from what has gone well when we've given choice and we've given opportunity. My most challenging experiences so far have been when I've been asking all students to do this one thing or all staff to do this one thing. So, when in my previous context where we introduced a coaching approach and everyone had to be coached and, one staff member just being deemed uncoachable. It was just, trying to, force them to do the coaching, And I think when I was a bit more naive, and everyone has to do this, that's where I came up against the greatest challenges. Similarly with students, to be honest, what didn't work so well for us was having an explicit positive education subject at year 10. That was where we put a lot of our energy into and students were really at an age where they wanted to explore in their own way and they didn't want this kind of, one-size-fits-all approach, I should say. So that's why we started to bring in coaching. So, whereas in the younger year levels, they're more open, they're more flexible and there's a little bit more psychological safety, I think, in trying new things. And in year 9 for us at Timbertop, that's where Pos Ed is at its best and you can really apply the learning. So I think, just try whenever I've tried to really shove it down someone's throat or a group's throat, I think that's when we've really failed. Yes, that's my
Thanks for sharing your failure. And also, could I ask you to expand on Timbertop? Because many of our listeners aren't going to have a clue what that is. And I think there's a brilliant opportunity for others to learn from your experiential outdoor environment there. So could you give us a high-level overview of Timbertop?
Yes, so Timbertop is our Year 9 campus. So students are around 14 or 15 in Year 9 in Australia. And I think we're coming into our 70th anniversary of Timbertop. So it's been quite a progressive experience for students for a number of years. It involves students going off to our campus up in Mansfield in the hills, up the top of Victoria, beautiful setting. They live in units of about 14 and they're with that unit for the entire year. They have a head of unit, so really strong relationships are built. They chop the firewood to heat the water for their showers. There's a lot of emphasis on teamwork. There's hiking. They build up to a half marathon at the end of the year. They're skiing. It really is outdoor ed at its best, or adventure education as we call it. There are real challenges along the way. So they definitely do learn resilience. And usually students come back, it's just this pinnacle experience for them where, it is that whole, experience of being very, very challenged. And even if you're sweating and you're hating it at the time, you just feel so good about it afterwards. So we really do see that in students time and time again. So the staff up there are fabulous. So conversations around character strengths are just so powerful. Conversations about grit, and perseverance. There's the real-time application of that, talking about flow, having flow experiences while they're running or they're hiking or they're climbing. It is the best place for us. It's such a fertile environment to really have these conversations about being quite proactive about your wellbeing and also navigating challenges. So usually when we run our wellbeing surveys and the research that Melbourne Uni did a few years ago into our positive education program, that's where wellbeing levels and the way we measure them are, at their highest, I suppose, for all these reasons. It's not just because we're teaching Pos Ed, it's about the environment that it's happening in.
It's funny because I was talking to friends at a dinner party about the program at Timbertop on the weekend, and the first thing they asked me was, is this the place they send bad students to punish them? and it's this balance of what you said about it being this fertile ground to actually try out those skills in a place where you need them. And it's not as a punishment, but it's so funny that was my first thought when I first heard about this campus and everyone at this dinner party. And yet I haven't seen a better example of how to create a safe place for students to actually have some deep, meaningful, real challenge in order to practice those resilience skills.
I think so, and in a very safe environment, because there is so much good work put into the building of relationships to really facilitating and supporting and scaffolding those growth experiences that they have throughout the course of the year. Every time I go up to Timbertop, I feel good because it's such a positive environment and the staff are so can-do, and relationships are crucial. They're the cornerstone of everything that they do. So, it's a very special place.
One of the things that I really noticed when I visited Timbertop, I was fortunate to spend a few days, and it felt different in its hierarchy than a conventional school setting. And I really wonder about that, because we know the research says well-being is high when you come back from this experience. And I do deeply wonder about how much freedom the students are given, but also there's this leveling of playing field, and kind of that dominant subordinate goes away a little bit more than you might see in any other school. Has there been any research or thought around that, and then bringing some of that into the rest of the school?
Yeah, well, we are. I mean, one of the things we're always focusing on is how do we, and that's a big part of my role now, is how do we support transition into senior school after this really peak experience that students have at Year 9, where, it is a level playing field. They've experienced so much accomplishment, and, the community, and then they move into senior school, and there is more of that 10, 11 and 12 hierarchy again that they have to negotiate. So one of the things that we're focusing on is how do we extend that Adventure Ed experience beyond, so that they can really build on those accomplishments and the strengths that they've developed, and be engaged and challenged in similar ways, as well as how do we broaden out their experience while they're at senior school, so that it's not just about Adventure Ed, it's about, engaging with a range of different diverse opportunities. It's about keeping Timbertop as a unique environment, but also capturing the best of it, and then broadening out students' experience so that they can really play to their strengths, and they feel that they have a place when they're in the senior school, that they can grow and develop in a similar way, even if it's through different pursuits. And similarly, how do we best prepare students for that Timbertop experience in the middle school is an emphasis for us, because it is quite challenging at times, and it's not for everyone. So, we're looking at both ends of the school. How do we best prepare students and then extend their experience into senior school, so that they feel a sense of belonging, I suppose, wherever they're at.
I love that kind of full vision, and thank you for sharing that. I have a question, because we're called the Flourishing at School podcast.
Yeah.
And we've been talking a lot about well-being and the student and the staff. If you think of that word flourishing and imagine Geelong Grammar when you step into the school and you've got the 4 different campuses, how do you tell that a campus, a classroom, a student is flourishing? What's that indicator that you have that would tell you, yep, we've got it right?
For me, yeah, it's interesting, as you will both know, stepping into schools, there's sort of something, in the water, in the air, that you can sense as to what the dynamic is and what the culture is. And so, for me, it's when students are happy, when they're smiling, when they're laughing, where they're connected, where you're not seeing someone off on their own, where there's diversity, where there's a sense that students can be who they are and who they want to be safely. So where there's a psychological safety, I think that can be quite palpable. It's really important for us that when we focus on wellbeing, it's not just wellbeing for me, it's about for others. And I think when a school is at its best and when we're flourishing, we are achieving our aim at Geelong Grammar, but I think it's every school, educational institution's aim of shaping young people who can go out and make a positive difference in the world. And so I think flourishing looks like students supporting other students, being kind to other students, feeling free to be themselves, but also allowing others to be themselves, and that can be hard when you're a teenager because you're trying to fit in. And we can be quite tribal. So I think we're always trying to work against that, inclination. So flourishing for me is, I think that feeling good, functioning well, but also doing well for others that Lee Waters spoke of.
Jason's usually adding that on to my conversation as well. And I love it. I mean, when I talk about it now, I've switched the perma M from meaning to mattering, because that external lens is more important, I think. And I think especially with the teenagers who are so self-centered and as you're supposed to be developmentally, but really flipping that lens and saying, okay, how about if we look outside? And I often think of, not just because you are one thing as a student doesn't mean you have to judge another thing as bad. You may not choose chocolate ice cream. You might like vanilla, but it doesn't mean vanilla is bad. It's just not your choice. And so with teenagers really switching from this me to we lens, absolutely. I need to add that. Thank you. I'm counting on the two of you to crack the whip if you hear me saying only feeling good and functioning well, because I got to add the third component on.
I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Sorry, Jason.
No, that's all right. No, I'm glad you guys are both talking about that, because Tamara is right. Do talk about, why do we want to flourish as individuals? And it's to have a positive impact on the world around us. So that's the goal. Hey, Rhiannon, no doubt you're reading and listening to a lot of stuff, given your love of learning. So for our listeners, though, could you maybe recommend one or two things that you've either read recently or are listening to as a podcast that you would think they would enjoy?
Yeah, so I drive mostly to our Corio campus, so I have a 50-minute commute every day from Melbourne, and so I'm getting into audiobooks finally, because the pile of books on my bedside table isn't getting anywhere. So I've been listening to Adam Grant's Think Again, and I know that many of your listeners probably have already read that. And I'm really, really enjoying that at the moment, because it's just speaking to my own feeling that intellectual humility is what we all need to focus on and cultivate in this day and age. And yes, just the ability to cultivate curiosity about other people, about ideas that might be challenging. Coming out of COVID, where we were quite polarised, I think, this is the time to really look at that. So if anyone hasn't read Adam Grant's Think Again, I highly recommend it. And in terms of podcasts, I always come back to Tara Brach's podcast. And I don't know, Tamara, we were talking about Tara Brach when you were here. Self-compassion has been a real focus and interest of mine, just cultivating self-compassion, and she really grounds me. So any time I need grounding, I need a bit of wisdom, I usually come back to Tara Brach and just her mindfulness meditations and her teachings, always manage to ground me.
I do love some Tara, and her voice, just hearing her voice, I think is probably soothing my nervous system. I could probably just play like 10 seconds and it would pop me back into that quite quickly. I bet you don't have that, Jason.
Mother.
Well, Rhiannon, before we wrap up, I wonder if there's anything that we missed talking about that you'd like to share with our audience. I know we didn't really go deeply into the kind of the connection between the creative education and the did you call it adventure? Adventure
education. Yeah. So we define that as experiential learning with and through nature. And creative education is really, 21st century skills, collaboration, problem solving, and so on. So as you can see, lots of overlap. In terms of anything we didn't touch on, I think probably there's just a theme that runs through any conversations I have about wellbeing in schools or leading wellbeing that, we never get it perfectly right. I think Geelong Grammar has been held up as the model of, best practice for so long, which, is, we've been very fortunate to be able to try new things and, that's obviously drawn a lot of attention to the work that we do, but we don't get it perfectly right all the time either. I think when you're dealing with school communities, which are dynamic, which are ever changing and ever evolving, we just really need to be humble, I suppose, to pick up on Adam Grant's message and listen and learn from our community at every step of the way, which means we're always changing and we're never perfect, I suppose. So that's just the message I always want to send out there, because I do feel sometimes people say, oh, Geelong Grammar, they've done it, they've, got it spot on, So we're always learning and we don't always get it right. And if you speak to some of our students, they'll say, oh, God, they keep going on about this Pos Ed stuff. So that's the message I want to send.
Well, I love that message. And I know I'm always sharing that message with the people who think if I just overlay what Geelong Grammar did onto my school, then I will have it right. And I'm always saying, Geelong Grammar doesn't say that they have it right yet. So don't imagine that you can take their tool and apply it to your context that's different. And you're going to have a solution that you need to model their curiosity about and what else.
Absolutely.
And the depth of it across all of the layers. And it's just not as simple as we all want it to be, right? Wouldn't it be nice if it was simple?
Oh, it's so nice. And, my big focus is learning from one another. I just think the more we can connect with other educators, other leaders, other schools in other countries or within our own community, I think we can just learn from each other and cultivate a community of practice. And that's really been our focus more recently with our institute and our school. Is that's what we want to do. We want to help support a community of practice and ongoing conversation.
Well, I love that. And I'm going to encourage our listeners, as we wind up, we usually invite everyone to connect with us. And so stay connected with Rhiannon. You can find her on LinkedIn. I'm going to make a mental note to invite Kat on so that we've got an institute representative as well, so that we can have the school and the institute both represented. But please do connect with Rhiannon on LinkedIn. If you're listening to us today, you can also watch us, because we're not only a podcast, we also are a YouTube channel, the Flourish DX YouTube channel. And in addition to connecting with Rhiannon, don't forget to connect with Jason and I. We're super active on LinkedIn. And that's it for today. Until the next episode, keep flourishing at school and in life.
You've been listening to the Flourishing at School podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on whole school mental health, follow Flourish DX School on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Flourishing at School podcast at www.flourishingatschool.com.